And now we would like to dig into the main presentation for today. And we will have with us Marcin Wolek, who is an experienced traffic planner who's been involved for many years in SUMP development in the city of Gdynia, as well as he's an associate professor at the University of Gdansk. And he will be presenting how the city of Gdynia collects and uses data for planning sustainable mobility measures and developing SUMPs. So I will now hand over the floor to you, Marcin.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I am showing my screen. Can you see my screen? Yeah. I hope so. If I don't hear any objection, I can start. Welcome, everybody, and the topic is quite challenging because I would say that there is endless demand for data when we are going to prepare any type of document, and especially such complex document like SUMP. But I try to structure my presentation. I would like to present you a short information about SUMP in Gdynia, then some questions we want to address. Then I'd like to present you using traffic model for developing scenarios, then monitoring, which is huge consumer of data, and then how to search partners for developing data, and some conclusions. If you have any questions, please do not wait until my presentation ends. I prefer situation when any question is raised immediately, then we have proper context and we can discuss on it. So as Lasse and Esther told, thank you for introduction. I am a city councillor in Gdynia for almost 20 years. And a few years ago, within Civitas Dynamo project, together with Union of Baltic Cities and Ruprecht Consult, we started to develop first SUMP for Gdynia. So it was very challenging process, and we finalized it in November 2016 by adopting SUMP as a City Council Act. It was quite successful, and now we are in very dynamic process of implementation of particular measures, but also trying to think about improvement of our existing SUMP. So I will start my presentation now. It was our main idea how to approach SUMP for the city of Gdynia. We thought it had to be dynamic, integrated, interactive, and advanced. All it meant that our SUMP had to be developed in strong partnership with different partners, not only because of our metropolitan context, but also because of the strong presence of different scientific and research units, different mixture of public transport authorities, and quite complex political situation. If we discuss about stakeholder engagement, which is important for the next part of my presentation, we defined stakeholders in the first stage of our SUMP process preparation. We highlighted public administration, city guard and police, public transport sector, academia, education sector like schools, non-government organizations, and some important companies important from traffic map of our cities. But tools we used, there were workshops, meetings, public debates, individual consultations with experts, conference, seminars, marketing research, which was very widely used for collecting data. We also developed a website, a Facebook profile, up to now more than 4,500 likes. And we use also advanced methodology for self-assessment, and I will speak a little bit about it in the next slides. As Esther presented before, We also tried to develop common vision of mobility. This is always trade-off between some general sentences, but and common agreement. Starting point for us was quality of life, but quality of life linked with economics aspects, with environmental aspects, and with efficient energy applied to public transport system. During our SUMP process, we developed 4 strategic goals, which were attractive and safe urban space, safe and efficient transport system, rational transport choices, and effective freight transport, because we have very specific location of harbor, which is almost in the center of the city. So main questions, according to data management or data collection process, in case of our SUMP, were how does Gdynia work with data collection and analysis? How are our concrete practices, and which challenges have we encountered, and how we did overcome them? But I tried to go deeper in my presentation. So where data is being used within SUMP circle, what data seems to be crucial. We had a lot of challenges with some so-called easy data on modal split, motorization index. We had traffic model, but the big question was, is it overestimated or underestimated tool for planning sustainable urban mobility? Are we able to prepare SUMP without traffic model? And the answer is, of course, yes. We established strong partnership for data collection and analysis. So whom could we use for data collection and monitoring? So I have started to define endless problems and challenges with data for SUMP. Problems we encountered was lack of data, lack of valid data, lack of verified data, lack of data in desired format, lack of representative data, and lack of data processed and transformed into readable information. And challenges are, I think, quite obvious among different cities. Data collection costs money. Data collection takes sometimes a lot of time. It needs different procedures. They should be processed and presented properly, not only in front of scientists or traffic managers, but to different stakeholders, sometimes without academic background. Data collection process is growing legal challenge and will be even bigger legal challenge in the future. We had big discussion about common definitions, like what is pedestrian journey? Is it journey on the distance above 100 meters, 500 meters? And there is always discussion primary versus secondary data. So should we collect data for a certain reason, or should we try to use data already collected? So I will start with data audit. I think it is crucial, and it was very crucial for us, that we started to research what data could we use in the initial phase of SUMP. And we put it on the SUMP circle, and I tried to underline where we can highlight the highest demand for data, especially in preparatory stages, like conducting self-assessment and reviewing availability of resources. Data is a crucial resource, so if we have some deficits, we should evaluate them properly and think about strategies how to overcome it. And also in point on identification of key actors and stakeholders. It is also important part because some stakeholders could have data we are interested in. Another stage was preparation of analysis and problems and opportunities and developing scenarios. So on this preparatory stage, the demand for data was very high, and it was big challenge to make a proper map, not only of data we want to collect, but also partners we can work together for that. Also, data were needed in developing smart targets, and during elaboration the plan, it is obvious that we need data for arrangement of monitoring and evaluation. So if I would summarize this slide, I would say that the biggest demand for data was in preparation stage, but also there are some data needs going across particular stages like rational and transparent goal setting, elaborating the plan, and implementing the plan. One of the easiest data we can collect directly from national of cars in the city. Usually we are transforming it into individual motorization index, and here you can see the process, but of course this is only output data. The motorization index just brings you information about number of cars in the city and is illustration of complex processes. If we could dive more into district, we could discover that city is divided. In case of motorization index, there are some districts more dependent on car and some districts less dependent on car. But of course, this is output, this is result, and we cannot see the real structure of particular processes. When we developed scenarios of mobility development in Gdynia, we used a traffic model. This is a big question. Should we use traffic model or not? It depends on many factors. In our situation, part of our tasks in Civita's Dynamo project was also development of traffic model. So it was very good parallel activity that we could use as an opportunity to enrich our SUMP by traffic model. So we developed 4 scenarios, and the output of scenario was traffic situation modeled by 2 factors, share of car and individual mobility of citizens of Gdynia. We developed 4 scenarios. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but one of the scenario is presented here. Scenarios using traffic model were very efficient in presenting a potential situation to city council members. This is the most negative scenario. This is traffic model for peak hour in part of our city in 2017. And monitoring. Monitoring is huge data consumer. I brought a table of main monitoring indicators for our SUMP, and we tried to develop a compromise between being very strict, between being very detailed, but also between having access to data which we can easily collect, because it is not a big challenge to develop very developed and complicated indicators, but I think the bigger challenge is to manage and monitor the process. In such a case, we do not need very complicated and complex indicators. Sometimes we observe a tendency to cover every goal with particular indicator. In our case, we try to stick to all strategic goals and not to cover each action goal with one indicator. And the final part of my presentation is how to search for stakeholders, because if we can collect stakeholders, we can collect some data. We focused on city office and its units, especially spatial planning offices, office responsible for investment, office responsible for traffic management, for environment, and for education. They showed a lot of data. Of course, not every time in a format we desired, but we were able to work with those, I would say, internal stakeholders. Another important stakeholders were police and city police or city guard. One of the most valuable source of data was public transport sector, especially public transport authority, public transport operators, and railway business companies like railway infrastructure managers. Obvious partner in that case is academia and other scientific bodies, also non-government organizations and some companies. Sorry, I mixed something. Okay. We used some primary data for SUMP in Gdynia, but they were primary data collected by Public Transport Authority, which here is presented as ZKM Gdynia. UG is University of Gdańsk. We work with our Public Transport Authority for years in case of some research. The main source of data were preferences and transport behavior of our citizens, which is regular research conducted every 2-3 years, and random sample includes 1% of population aged 16 to 70s. But of course, high representative is achieved, but we exclude youngsters. So the result is that we underestimate cycling and pedestrian travels. We also, to complete mobility picture for our city, we conducted also preferences and transport behavior of pupils in secondary schools, and we are going to make it regular activity. First time we started in 2014. We also, excuse me, we also conducted research on potential traffic improvements on main streets in central part of Gdynia. There were 3 separate research, electronic questionnaire, so it was very easy and low-cost activity to collect data. Bigger challenge was to process data, but the result was a partnership between the Road Authority of City of Gdynia and our university, because scientists usually search for data, and if they can get data sometimes for scientific publication, we can make a good deal. Also, we organized research on traffic volume and its structure on main streets in central part of Gdynia to get better knowledge about pedestrian traffic. And our Public Transport Authority organizes constant research on quality, about punctuality, regularity, and demand, profitability of particular lines, ticket sales. So it also provides us a good starting point for development of some measures focused mainly on public transport. One of the biggest challenge for us was lack of data on pedestrians. Every one of us is pedestrian, regardless of further travel by car, by bike, or by public transportation. But what was one of the biggest, I would say, discovery in my city, was the fact that we didn't have an idea how many pedestrians do we have. So we started to make first scientific research on it, but we found out that there is lack of common methodology, lack of common definition whom is pedestrian. So we started just to research traffic volume and its structure on main streets in central part of Gdynia. We found that pedestrian traffic share is around 22 to 25% of all journeys, and initial results were then confirmed by typical share of pedestrians in comparison to selected European cities. What is interesting that from our public transport authority research, there is information that pedestrians, but taken very strictly, they have only 11% in modal split. In our research, the share is almost doubled. And of course, if we do not have too much time or resources, and we advise it to every city in Poland, when they start to complain, we do not have enough resources like you, we do not have established cooperation with universities, we do not have very scientific and passenger-focused public transport authority, so we cannot collect the data. No, you can always use advanced self-assessment methodology, although it is also quite complicated and challenging, but with small guidance, it could bring very interesting results. I don't want to speak too much about it, but we are able to, according to advanced methodology, we are able to develop mission area and activity area. We are able to develop some important priorities. And here are priorities in Polish, but the highest priority was ticket integration of public transport in metropolitan area, parking management, and taking pedestrians into account when investment is planned. So we identified around 80 stakeholders, all of them were asked, and we got a good result for further prioritization of measures. So such advanced methodology does not require huge resources, and it is not very time-consuming activity. What are some certain areas to be researched? We also focused on school travels, because sometimes when we have lack of time and or resources, we have limited access to proper data. But in every city, schools are important mobility generators. But again, asking particular pupils might be time consuming, could encounter some legal problems as well as organizational problems. So we focused on school directors as a main sources of knowledge. So we prepared short questionnaire on school modal split and safety issues, which was distributed to directors in schools, and then we were able to aggregate results. But I put here, and as an example, one mid-sized city in Western Poland, which we worked for their SUMP 2 years ago, and we found a lot of interesting things according to school travels, not only by pupils but also by employees of schools. And it is good to be flexible and let our partners to do their job. Preparing a SUMP for Gdynia was of course complex activity, but parallelly a lot of scientific bodies, universities are working on their own research. Sometimes it is good to merge together. We developed a partnership with Krakow, Technical University of Krakow, which is located more than 600 kilometers far away of Gdynia, but they had a project on the evaluation of functionality of urban space in city centers. So we proposed, please come to Gdynia, we can support you, but you have to share with your data and findings. So it was a win-win situation. We got valuable input to our discussion on the quality of urban space in the city of Gdynia, and Technical University of Krakow got also one collected city in their scientific research. And it was very interesting input to our SUMP. Another partnership we set up was police. In Poland, I think that in many countries, police does have great data on traffic safety. We established early partnership, so we started to invite representatives of police at the very early stage of SUMP preparation in our city. And then we were able to ask them about data, which was quite challenging because data were collected in different format. They had to be reprocessed and because of some legal and because of some legal issues, we were not able to process them by ourselves. The total job had to be done by the police. But finally, we were able to prepare a map of accidents in 2015 for city of Gdynia, in division by pedestrians, cyclists, drivers and passengers of cars. And this map was highly evaluated by the police, so we established long-term partnership with police, and the map of accidents in 2017 will be published soon, and it will be a good input for our improved SUMP next year. And I said before, we used marketing research as a consultation process tool. There is a lot of data we collected, a lot of surveys. Sometimes preparing a survey has not to be a scientific process. If we need some confirmation, if we need some initial data and information, we could just prepare a very quick questionnaire. We have surveys, we have electronic surveys, we have a lot of possibilities now according to technology, and we are able to deliver such a data quite soon with low cost attitude. So final slide. If I could do it again, if we could do again our SUMP, I would start with be less optimistic according to monitoring values. Usually we assign some monitoring values during process of SUMP preparation, and usually we are strongly involved in work, so we are very optimistic. But sometimes it is good to take the data to external evaluator to make them more realistic. I would use again easy data as a potentially explosives. I mentioned in the beginning of our webinar motorization index. It is widely available data, but it is output data which is inflicted by many external and internal factors. And it is possible to change, but in a longer period. And it strongly depends on consumer behavior, which is again modeled by so many factors sometimes we are not aware of. I would engage some partners as early as possible. Our good point was that we engaged police in the beginning of our process, but this time if I could do SUMP again in my city, I would engage also other stakeholders, especially from harbor freight business much earlier than I did. I would be less strict about data quality. Sometimes we tend to be scientists, but if we want to get some initial knowledge about the process, we do not have to prepare huge marketing research. And I would prepare much detailed data audit in the first month of our SUMP activity. That's all, and I had 30 minutes for my presentation, so I finished 10 seconds before. Thank you very much for attention, and I am waiting for your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Marcin. That was extremely interesting. That was also shedding light on a lot of issues that I'm sure that our participants will have questions on. Whom to cooperate with, where you can find good data, what could maybe be also easy and cheap ways. But before we get into the interactive part, we have 2 short poll questions for you. So Daniel?
Yeah, we would like to ask you about your own experience and the circumstances regarding data and data collection in your city or your region. So the first question is the data available in your city or region illustrating the extent of the problematic regarding transport?
Yes.
We have 60% of the answers so far. Let's give it a couple of more seconds for the rest of you to respond. All right. 68. Yeah, okay. 75. Let's close the poll now. And here are the results. So, wow, 79% of you say that the data available is correct and it illustrates very well. That's good to know. You have good quality data. Then let's go to the second poll question here. And this one asks, what type of data collection tools do you use in your local planning processes related to mobility? And our options are recording the traffic flow on cities' road network, interviews or online or household travel surveys, a traffic model, smartphone apps, or accident air quality statistics. Okay, let's give it 10 more seconds. And we'll close the polls now. Okay, here you can see the results. So 36% of you use interviews or line or household travel surveys. Also, with number 29% use the records on traffic flow and traffic model with 21%. There's no use of smartphone apps. That's perhaps something to build upon, to use the new functionalities available. And yeah, last we also have some 14% for accident and air quality statistics. Thank you all for participating. We'll go back to Lasse.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, and now I think we will go to the next part, and I would just like to quickly remind you of the possibilities that you can raise your hand and you can write questions. I will just quickly. So because so far we have no questions have reached us. So while Maya and Marcin will start the interactive session, and Maya will start with a few questions, maybe you can take the time and think about your questions. Was there anything in Marcin's presentation that started some thoughts or some questions, some ideas on more details that you would need to know to be able to do similar things maybe in your city? And I see that the first questions are coming in. So I would just like to quickly. Okay, but then I think I will hand over now to Maya, who is working with Esther in UBC and who will be moderating the interactive session, which we have half an hour for. Maya and Marcin, please stay with us. The floor is yours.
Okay, good day from my behalf as well. So now we have, like Lasse said, now we have like some time to discuss and ask questions from Martin. And thanks, Martin. I think that was like really interesting presentation, and I think you showed like what kind of all kind of different kind of data is needed to prepare SUMP, and also like how cooperation with different kind of stakeholders is really important. And also it was really good that you showed like that data is actually needed in quite many different phases of the SUMP. We have first question here, and this is actually, I also wanted to ask this one that Martin Berlin is asking, that what was the biggest concerns and worries among your politicians when you prepared SUMP? And I could maybe add another question also to that, that how did you use like some data? Because of course it's important to get political approval for the SUMP. So did you use some specific data to convince the politicians that certain measures needs to be approved? So the biggest concerns and worries among your politicians, and then did you use like some specific data?
Okay, thank you for this question. Yes, this is always big challenge when we prepare SUMP, and then it has a form of ready document, but it should be approved by the city council. And what data are crucial from perspective of particular councillors? I would say that they are grouped on two levels. The first level is on very local level, focused on the district, because usually councillors are being elected from smaller areas than the whole city. So sometimes they are focused on a very specific area. And if we are able to present some data focused on that area, like pedestrians, like traffic accidents, it is okay. So I think that every types of maps, like maps of accidents, they have strong impact to local decision makers. We are able to present unsafe crossings. We are able to present unsafe road sections to highlight safety problems. Another issue was also to present data focused on school safety. It is always hot topic regardless of city and country. We are also parents, so every councillor is strongly focused on such issues like safety of small pedestrians or small cyclists. And going up to the level of the city, I think that very universal data is data on modal split. But of course, modal split is a holy grail of all traffic managers and transport planners, because it composes of many sub-data, like data on pedestrians, data on cyclists, data on car traffic. So I think that one of the biggest challenge was to establish a starting point as a modal split. And then modal split was a starting point for our modeling process, and negative scenarios were very good to present consequences of not introduction of SUMP. So both very local level focused on district and also general level focused on the city.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Martin. I think this, like how to get political approval for the SUMPs, this is a really crucial question for many of the cities. You showed like that you have collected quite a lot of different kind of data for your SUMP, but what would you recommend for smaller cities with a bit less resources that, well, you mentioned the modal split data, which is maybe always sort of the starting point, but what is really the most important data, or where would you like start from if you have limited resources and you can't access like all kind of data?
I would start like we used to start. I would start to research existing databases and elaborations conducted by different city administration units. I mentioned spatial planning department, environmental department, traffic department, road maintenance department, education department. There is a lot of data. Sometimes they are stored in different formats, but we, in every city, I used to work in Poland, in Germany or in Ukraine, there was always a lot of data stored internally. So I think such data audit is the first crucial element, because sometimes we can discover really interesting data sets, and if we are able to use them, we can save a lot of time and money. So data audit as the beginning.
Okay, thanks. You also mentioned that one of the key goals for the SUMP in Gdynia was to improve the quality of life. And did you use, or that of course, like when we talk about all the sustainability aspects like economic, environmental and social sustainability, so maybe for the SUMP, the environmental aspects are easier to measure also, like did you actually reach the targets, but how did you take into account the questions of like economic and social sustainability, and especially like quality of life, that how can it be measured, that what are you actually like reach the targets, like that, yeah, does the SUMP manage to improve quality of life in the city? So did you consider this topic?
Yes, of course, but to be honest, quality of life is so horizontal and general issue that it could be linked almost to every type of activity in the city. If I could, I answer in that way. If I could work on SUMP in city of Gdynia again, I would stronger focus on environmental issues, especially on air quality and noise. At the time when we started in 2014, these issues were, in my opinion, a little bit underestimated, but now they are very hot topic in almost every Polish city. We do not have big problems with air quality, but now we are developing better air quality monitoring. And this air quality monitoring might be very efficient in case of monitoring of some results of SUMP implementation. So for sure, absolutely environmental aspects. And from economic point of view, one of our big discussions was economic availability of public transportation. At what cost are we able to deliver public transport services to different groups of our citizens? And one of major indicator being discussed at that time was economic efficiency of public transportation. So relation of fare box to total costs of public transport services.
Okay, thanks. We had last week in Tampere, we had this SLP1 finalizing workshop, and we discussed also like partly this. And when it comes to quality of life, one of the sort of indicators was mentioned, like the number of students and young people in the city, that's a good, at least many cities consider that as a really good indicator that whether you have managed to improve quality of life in the cities. Yeah, you also.
If I could interrupt you for this last comment, especially trying to get on board youngsters, we were discussing strongly about this concept 8 to 80 in the urban space. If urban space is friendly for 8 years child and for 8 years old woman or man, it means that it is friendly for everyone. This is very interesting concept from Scandinavia, which we wanted to implement in our SUMP. And I remember that one of our research was just easy observation of people on the street, but looking especially on parents with kids, how they behavior. Do they let kids to play and to run, or just they are very strictly guided in the street? Because this is a result of the perception of safety on the street, and that in that case it was very interesting for us to find out some, I would say, unpleasant places in our space for kids and their parents. So this is very interesting, and I think it should be focused in the future by our traffic authority as well.
Okay, thanks for the answer. You mentioned also that you have collected quite a lot of input from the citizens, and I don't know that Gdynia has been working with a lot with public involvement, and you have these mobility platforms and website and Facebook. So how did you actually deal with that input that you got from like citizens? That how was it like processed all the information so that you can get like useful input for the SUMP?
Thank you for that question, because yes, we developed a platform on mobility of the city, and also we developed Facebook, and they proved to be very efficient tool in case of collection data. But to be honest, they created a need for one person for constant management of those instruments like website and Facebook. And then data collection is only one element of the process. The second one is data processing and transforming them into information. But for this second stage, there was a strong partnership with universities, and I also represent university, and we are always ready to work for data, not only for money, but we also are researchers. We search for data, we search for good case studies. So there is sometimes possibility to establish such a partnership on completely non-money fundament. But for management and operation of website and Facebook, there was at least one person fully delegated to the tasks from the city of Gdynia.
Yeah. You have like also I encourage if all the other participants have like questions to Marcin, so now it's a good chance to ask, and you can just post your question in the question box. You have mentioned a lot of times that cooperation with different kind of institutions is like really crucial to collect the data, and then you can also save your own resources. Did you have any problems to get data from, like, I know that in some countries like cities struggle to get, from example, data from the public transport operators, that they don't want to keep the data, and there might be also like some data confidentiality issues. So did you have any of these kind of challenges?
We have constant problems with data. It is obvious that, especially, we have a lot of legal challenges according to personal data protection and so on. This is probably the problem with wider using of apps because almost everyone now is using smartphone. It is very tempting to install an app and to get really individual data on mobility. But of course, we have some clash with protection of privacy, and we have to develop a kind of compromise between what we want and between protecting the privacy of our citizens. This is a big question now, strongly discussed on the EU level. But of course, we had and we have a lot of problems. Some operators are not very happy to share data with us. Sometimes they say that it's their data protected system. We are unable to get it, but I think for general mobility picture, you do not need billion of data. You can start what you have in your civic administration, in your public transport system, which is always somehow linked to public transport authorities. So I think that you can use a lot of data, and of course you can start asking your citizens. You have technology, you have apps, you have websites, you have a lot of dedicated websites to marketing research. So I think it is just sometimes the biggest challenge is just to start.
Yeah. Then we have like questions coming also from the participants. Good that you are also activating. So we have here like, what data did you obtain from the universities?
As a university, we prepared data on counting pedestrians and cyclists in the city center. That was the first area that my city wanted to get some new data, especially in the city center. So that was. And the second one was perception of public space in the center of the city. That was data provided us by Technical University of Krakow under the agreement, but we did, as a city, we didn't pay any Polish zloty for that data. So we generally got two streams of data from university. The first counting of pedestrian and cyclists, and the second one perception of public space in the center of the city.
Okay, thanks. And then we have next question that did you develop a web participation platform or any similar digital tool for crowdsourcing, or is there any link that you could provide us? Maybe you could share a bit like that you had this Mobilna Gdynia platform, so that how was it working?
Mobilna Gdynia was developed by our road management authority, also within Civitas Dynamo project. It is still active, and I know that city is still using it, although Civitas Dynamo project has finished and we finally approved our SUMP in 2016. It still needs some management and work, so around 1/3 of man-month employee is dedicated to this Mobilna Gdynia platform. And the city is using it sometimes for data collection as well, especially if there is research on potential changes in traffic in the center of the city. this is a good way to communicate with citizens. I am not sure whether I responded properly to question.
I think you maybe had the link to that also included in your presentation, so participants can then
Okay.
check how the Mobilia Gdynia is working.
Okay.
Then we also have a question that how did you motivate your citizens to provide data? Data like on their wishes and condition, and how to really engage citizens in the process.
We used different forms of contacts with our citizens, using workshops, using in-house interviews, using electronic questionnaires, asking them directly on the streets or sidewalks. So I think such a diversification of forms of contact was the best insurance in case of lack of response or activity of our citizens. Sometimes people don't want to respond being asked directly on the street, but we have this Mobilna Gdynia website, so people can return home. They can answer directly via Mobilna Gdynia. I print in a link to Mobilna Gdynia here. I hope it is visible. So
Esther also shared. Now it's in the chat box. Esther shared the link. So you can check that.
But of course, this is big. This is problem because some certain part of citizens are less open to discussion or to research, like elderly people or people with lower economic status. But of course, we are approaching them as well. And of course, there is also a big challenge with electronically excluded people. If we focus only on internet or apps, we can easily lose people without proper connection to internet, which means elderly people. So we have to ask them in a different form, like interview, on-street interview, in-house interview, and things like that.
So it's like really the combination of different kind of methods that you need, this traditional face-to-face, and then also maybe these using new technologies. Related, if nobody else has any questions, I still have one related also to poll question, because we were asking the participants that what kind of tools you have used, and nobody had used like this mobile app. So is Gdynia, have you used any like smartphone apps, or have you been considering to use those for the data collection?
We are considering now, because when we started in 2014, using app was not very popular, especially among different types of citizens, especially elderly people. Now, popularity of smartphones is growing. We expect that around 75 people in Gdynia use smartphones, and we are now working with one IT company to develop app for tracking their daily mobility. But as I mentioned before, we have to be careful with personal data protection system, which to some extent creates some clash with our demand for data, unfortunately.
Those are important questions to consider. Okay, but thanks a lot, Marcin, for your answer, and I think we will end the interactive session here, and I will give floor back to Lasse, who still will wrap up the webinar. But thanks a lot, Marcin, for the answer.
Thank you very much. On the presentation, you have my email, so if you come across any question, ideas, do not hesitate to contact me. I am very interested in every SUMP activities around Europe. Thank you very much. I was very pleased and honored to share with you with some of our activities in Gdynia. Thank you.